So what we're doing in this series is looking at the power of certain things, and the first one is the power of a purpose. And again, I think it's really important to establish that right from the start, I believe strongly that Jesus offers us, that we're made for Jesus, every single person, and he offers us certain things that nothing else in the world can give, and that everyone, no matter who you are, what your background is, what philosophy you believe in, we need those things. And he's the only one who can give those things as we want them, and he's the only one who can give all of those things. And what we're going to look at today is that question of meaning and purpose. Why am I here? And, I'm going to argue. Well, I think to really unpack this, you need a couple of hours. But I'm going to try and do a kind of whistle-stop tour of why I think it's so important to remind ourselves of the truth that Jesus is the only one who can really give meaning and purpose, and to remind ourselves of what that is and think about what it might look like in our own lives. All right, so nice and easy. Okay, so if we go on to the next slide, please. Right, so I used to go into, before I worked in a school, I used to go into schools and do stuff on looking at Christianity. And one of the things that you'd do is you'd always ask the teenagers there, or the young people, if you could ask God any question, what question would you ask? You always knew there'd be one jokey question that would keep coming up that I'm not going to repeat because it's inappropriate. But another question that would come up every time is there a meaning in life? Is there a reason why I'm here? Is there a purpose behind it all? So teenagers and young people are asking that. I read this in the Radio Times about 2 years ago. This is Professor Brian Cox, the guy from Manchester. He's like, isn't Mars so big and all that? He's that one. But loads of people love him, and he's really good. He's talking about the amazingness of the universe and breaking it down. And it was advertising this. He said, I'll try and read it out in his accent. He said, against the backdrop of some of the most profound music of the 20th century, he'll be talking about the really big questions that face us. Like, how do we deal with the finite nature of our lives? And how do we explain our place in the universe? So, and this was... Thanks. Yeah, thanks. So this was like a kind of thing that they were putting on. So it's basically, he's going to have really nice music, and then they're going to try and explain why we're here. And the answer for this was, it's all kind of weird stuff like, the more we understand the universe, the more we know why we're here. And I've read up on some of this stuff, and the more I've read it, the more I'm like, it's just left me more confused. And surely if you boil it down as well, if you're saying there's no God or anything, then all you're saying is we're here because of random chance. Right? So it's all that kind of stuff. But anyway, they're asking these questions, and he packed out places like the Royal Albert Hall of middle-aged people wanting to know, why am I here? What's my purpose? What's my meaning? I have a friend who worked in a hospice for a year or two, and he said the biggest question that people ask when they know they've got a few, sometimes weeks, days left of their life is, what was my meaning or purpose? Why was I here? Did it mean something or not? And he said so many people are saying, I never felt like I got the answer to that question, and I wish I had. And I don't know whether what I did was worth it or not. I'm sure you heard that thing as well. The biggest thing that people say is, I wish I spent more time with people and not as much time maybe working or doing. Things like that. So if you look across the whole spectrum of kind of human age and experience, everyone's asking that question. For some people, they might not ask it that much. I find often with particularly my friends who don't have a faith, if we're out and they've had quite a few drinks, particularly at a wedding reception, this comes up. If we go outside, they'll all be like, just why am I here, man? And all that kind of stuff. All those questions kind of come up. But people do ask it. If you have the next slide, please. All right, so here are possible answers to the meaning question that human beings have come up with throughout human history. So we've got... if you click through Louise, I think it's got... Oh, yeah, don't worry if it doesn't. Just go on to the next slide if it doesn't come up. But yeah, anyway, so you've got stuff like, it could be, the most important thing to do is to be successful in your career or whatever you're doing. It could be to earn lots of money and provide. It could be to raise a family. It could be to have a loving and meaningful relationship. It could be to try and live forever. That's one of the things the ancient Greeks came up with. We need to find the answer to living forever. That's the meaning of life. It could be to gain wisdom and knowledge and pass it on to other people. It could be to make the world a better place. Lots of these suggestions are all kind of floating around. And if you study any kind of historical character, you'll find normally that was they had a meaning like that. And that's what they based everything off. Because what we think our meaning or purpose is will be the underlying thing that guides us in everything we do. Oh, yeah. Oh, there we go. Oh, but the biggest one. Oh, thanks, Louise. Also, thanks, Louise, for always serving on here. Yeah? Always doing a great job. Thanks, Louise. But yeah, the biggest one, though, I'd say in our culture is you've got to be happy. That's the meaning. Most important thing, be happy. And you'll see that a lot of the decisions people make, or a lot of the way we phrase big, complex arguments, it boils down to, are you happy or not? Well, you need to be happy. So yeah, if you go to the next slide. Philip Yancey is one of my favourite authors. I think he's great. If you've never read any of his stuff, I'd highly recommend his books. But he said, if I look to modern culture for an answer to why am I here, I can only infer that we are here to laugh, make money, become famous, and look as good as possible. And I think there's a lot of truth in that, particularly people in my age group. If you look at what they gear their lives around, it's going towards stuff like that. A lot of my friends, particularly male friends, a lot of their life is in the gym. You know, and quite obsessively, like, you know, be it it's leg day, it's this day. You know, so you've got to look good. A lot of what my friends will do for entertainment, it'd be, what's the highlight of my week? Oh, there's a new thing on Netflix. You know, and they'll rinse through it. It'll be like, you know, 5 seasons long, 24 episodes each season. They've watched it in a week. It's bang. And then at the same time, they'll be like, I don't really have time to do something like go to church or read the Bible. You know, that kind of thing. Or it could be, you know, or another thing is like, it's big on experience. You've got to have lots of experiences. I know for a lot of my friends who don't have a faith, the highlight of their year is where are we going on holiday? You know, and it'll be like we're going to New Zealand. It's all geared towards that. You know, you count down the days towards it. And then when you're in New Zealand and you've got 3 days before it ends, you get really sad and morose because you're going back to normal life. And so for a lot of people, it can be that it's that kind of short-termism. What's going to make me kind of happy just for now? Now, these things are all good things. I don't want to sound like I'm slating them. They're all really good things. But I would argue, if that's the main thing, it's not quite enough, is it? It's like what a writer in Ecclesiastes said. It's like trying to hold the wind in your hand. You feel content for a few seconds or short bit of time, and then it's gone. It doesn't quite live up to how we want it to live up to. Now, if you read a lot of people asking this question, it used to be in Western Europe, the answer to this question used to be very kind of like you'd think on a family level. You think, why am I here? And the main thing would be like, well, you know, you're here because you look after your family members, you carry on your legacy, and you do a good job of kind of being here. And lots of things like that. Now, we've kind of removed all of that. In Western culture, we've got rid of everything that used to give us our identity and tell us who we are. And we've kind of got rid of it and said, you have to find your own individual identity. And I'd argue the same things happen with meaning. So, what's the next slide? I can't remember. Oh, yeah, right. So, if you read lots of philosophers, particularly French ones for some reason, they would all say stuff like, well, there is no meaning. And they would say, no, Albert Camus, he was a French guy, he said, we're like Sisyphus in the Greek myth. I don't know if you know about him. He basically annoys the Greek gods, which you don't want to do, and is made for eternity to roll a boulder up a hill, only for when it gets to the top, it rolls back down. And then he has to do it the next day and the next day. So he has to do this incredibly hard, difficult task that never gets anywhere, that feels fruitless. And he argued that life can be like that if you're looking for meaning, because you're constantly looking for something that isn't there. And he said we're caught in this absurdity of we crave meaning, but there is no meaning. So human beings are constantly struggling and beating themselves up, saying, why am I here? If that makes sense. And I think a lot of people feel like that. If you look at a lot of writing, when people talk about that, it quickly leads into kind of despair and angst. If you look at a lot of films that are coming out now and TV shows, they'll have this message below. It's almost kind of like there's no meaning and we wish there was and I'm angry about it. So don't really think about it. That's going on for a lot of people. Interesting as well, I think, I read recently that Camus became a Christian right at the end of his life, in the last few days of his life, which he was very against most of the time, but that's interesting, isn't it? Okay, what's the next slide, Louise? Oh, yeah. Check this out. This is a guy called Jeffrey Greenberg. I'm not going to do an American accent. I just turned this into a sermon of dodgy accents. Given this awareness of our mortality, said Jeffrey Greenberg, to function securely, we need to feel somehow protected from this existential predicament, to feel like we're more than just material animals fated only to obliteration upon death. We accomplish that by trying to view ourselves as enduringly valuable contributors to a meaningful world. And the more others validate our value, the more special and therefore secure we can feel. What he's saying is, if you just left to your own devices, you can tend to think, everything I do, it doesn't quite fulfill me like I want it to. And it feels, if you get really think about it, you can be like, well, what's the point? What's the point of me doing anything if the sun's going to explode in a few million years and everything's going to be wiped out? Does it matter if I was good or bad? Did what I did yesterday, did that have any significance or purpose? I don't know. That's questions people are asking. But he's saying, actually, we do need meaning. You can't think about that too much. He was saying every single human being needs meaning. So what you get now is, I think most people, this is what I found. I went round and I asked quite a lot of my friends who particularly don't have a faith, do you think there's a meaning in life? And if so, what is it? And unanimously, they pretty much all said, no, there is no meaning. And then about 30 seconds later, they were like, but I think it's really important to love people and to raise a family. Or I think it's really important to do your job really well. Or I think it's really important to earn a job where you have the money that you can be happy and enjoy life. And I was like, kind of sounds like a meaning to me. You know what I mean? You kind of said no, but then yes, straight away afterwards. And the emphasis now for people is on created meaning. So you pick something. And that makes sense for our kind of culture, doesn't it? Which is a very kind of individualized, consumerist culture. What I mean by that is you make up your own decisions about everything about the world, and you take what you want. So I asked a really lovely guy at work. He's a science teacher, a really good guy. And I asked him, do you think there's a meaning in life? And he kind of was like, good question. And we sat there for about a minute, and he's like, right. He's like, before he was a teacher, he was involved in research that was helping prevent disease by looking at how cells work. And he said, when I did that, I felt like that was my meaning, that I was contributing something important and valuable to the world. And he said, as I've gone on, though, and become a teacher, I think it's to help young people. And that's all really great, yeah? Really good stuff. And we'll get onto that right at the end. But at the same time, he said, I still feel like there's something missing. And he also said, and it's hard, when you try and help people, it only really works like 30% of the time. 70% of the time, they keep making bad decisions, or it doesn't quite work how you wanted. Or even when it does work, you only feel good for a short amount of time. I was like, really interesting that he's saying all this stuff. So the problem is, and creative meanings have lots of problems. But if my creative meaning was, okay, well, I want to, have an amazing family and get married and stuff like that. Well, what happens if that doesn't work out? Or if it's, I want to be really successful in my career and stuff like that. What happens if the company goes bust and you get made redundant? These creative meanings very quickly can let you down. And also, if you really think about it, you end up at a point where you're like, there's no actual real meaning in it. I've just made it up, haven't I? I've just decided, if you really think about it on that process. At the school I work at the moment, a lot of teachers are currently going to leave in the summer. And I was like, and I've talked to quite a few of them, and there's lots of different reasons, but I've generally felt in my heart the main reason is you've had 2 years of kind of sitting at home and thinking, and you've been asking this question a lot of why am I here, and you've basically been like, I don't really know, so I think I need to do something different. And so for some of them, it's like I need to be in a different part of the country because that will be better. The grass is greener. Or I think I need a different job and a different role. And in a lot of the cases, I'm like, I don't think that's going to do it for you. Another one of the teachers I got on really well with last year, he was there for a year and he's a great guy. He was from Leeds, a really good sense of humour. Great. Is that right, Jan? No, okay, yeah. Okay, right. But he was great, and it was one of those people like, it was great being a TA in his class. And then he told me he was going to go work in Mexico City. And I was praying for him about it. And I might be wrong, but I really felt like he gave lots of good reasons, like it'd be good to teach in another country, and if I'm going to do it, I need to do it now, and all that stuff. But I felt like more than anything, I think you're doing this because you don't know why you're here. And you're thinking, if I go to Mexico City, I'll have more meaning and purpose. So, and I was thinking, I'll chat to him about it, and never did. Whoops. But anyway, I was, still praying for him. But I think that can happen quite a lot. Okay, next slide, please, Louise. Okay. What does Christianity have to say about this? I love this quote by C.S. Lewis. He's brilliant. If you've never read any of his stuff, read something. Mere Christianity is an amazing book. If you can get past the first section, which is the language is a bit older and it's a bit philosophical, but if you can get past that, it's brilliant. He said this. He said, creatures are not born with desires unless satisfaction for those desires exists. A baby feels hunger where there's such a thing as food. A duckling wants to swim where there's such a thing as water. If I find in myself a desire which no experience in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that I was made for another world. I love that. He's basically saying if you've got a desire in you and nothing satisfies it, chances are there's something that can satisfy it, but it's not in this world, in our normal human experience. And what he goes on to argue is because it's God. All these things are found in God. So I'd argue true meaning and purpose is found in God. Now, Louise, can I have the next one? Okay, now this is how John opens his gospel. There are 4 gospels, so 4 collections of the writings of Jesus, and they all start at a different point. Mark starts with John the Baptist, so it starts with Jesus already being about 30. Matthew goes back a bit further. Does anyone know where Matthew starts? Yeah, genealogy, and it links him back to Abraham. So it goes all the way back through Jewish history to say Jesus is the fulfillment of that. Luke goes back even further. He goes back all the way to Adam to say that he is the rescuer of all mankind. John goes back even further than that because he goes back before even time existed. And in this amazing little bit. And he says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. Because John wrote this. John lived in a city called Ephesus, which is one of the big cities in the ancient world. There was a big Jewish population, and there was a big Greek-speaking population. And there was a lot of philosophers, and people would spend a lot of time thinking. John's writing this gospel to them. He was a church leader amongst them, so he was all the time talking to these groups of people, telling them about Jesus. So when he writes this stuff, he wasn't just writing because he sounds nice. He's really cleverly constructing it so that every single one of those groups can get something of who Jesus is. When he starts with in the beginning, what's the first thing you'd think of if you were Jewish? Genesis, yeah. You'd notice it's exactly the same writing. And he starts talking about this thing called the Word. So let's unpack why he does that. But he says the Word was there before anything else started, and the Word was with God, but it was also God. Okay, so we're getting onto stuff that's a bit like, how does that work? All quite confusing. But it then says, for everything that's been made was made through this Word, and without that Word, nothing can exist. And in that Word is life. Now, I'd argue what John's doing is he's saying there's an answer to this question of is there a meaning or purpose? And he's saying there is, and it's this thing called the Word, or in Greek, the logos. Now, this had 2 meanings. The first one is, Louise, can we switch over to the next one? Brilliant. Okay, Jewish people noticed every time God creates, he did it in a certain way, which was he spoke. So God speaks and something happens. So he says, let there be light, you have light. Let there be animals, and fish that swim in the sea, there is. That's what he does. Let us make mankind in our own image. It happens. Here's a bit from one of the Psalms, one of the songs of the people of Israel. It says, by the word of the Lord the heavens were made, their starry host by the breath of his mouth. They had this real perception of God speaks and it happens, which is very contrasting to the other beliefs about God or the gods at the time, which was much more, they have something and they make it out of that. So if you look at the Babylonians, they used to think the world was created because some gods had a fight and one of them died, and out of their rotting body, they made the world. But this God is different. He just speaks and it happens, and it does. So for Jewish people, they had this understanding of that the word is God's kind of speaking and intention, and the one that created all things. Okay, Louise, can I have the next one? Which is why you could say, this is an amazing verse about Jesus in Paul. It's one of my favorites in the whole of the Bible. It says, in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities. All things have been created through him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. So it's saying he's not just a nice guy who taught some good stuff and then died and then rose again because God was like, oh, you're a really great person, let's do this. He was God in the flesh. And actually, he was part of what God did when he created the whole world. So this guy who was walking around in Israel in the beginning, 2,000 years ago, was the same one who was part of the process of creating the universe or creating us, all those kind of things. And that's still the case now. But I love that it's saying everything's through him and for him. So it's kind of saying purpose of anything is to be reconnected with its creator. That's why you're here. The Greeks use this word telos. What is the telos of something? If I brought a toaster and you came around to my house and I was using it as a doorstop, I think most of you would be a bit like, what are you doing? That's a bit of a stupid thing to do, especially if it was clearly like every time the door closes, it's whacking it a little bit and damaging it. You would be like, that's a stupid way to use a toaster. However, if I came round and I put some toast in, pinged it down, and we had some, Marmite on toast, which is my personal favourite, you'd be like, that's a good use of the toaster. It's telos is in the right thing. What it's claiming here is that for human beings, if we're connected to Jesus, we have the right telos. And if you don't, you don't. And so you'll always be asking that question. Okay, Louise, can I go to the next one? Right, now the Greek-speaking people was really interesting because they had a concept of the logos as well. So the Jewish people use this idea, the word of God, talk about God. But the Greek people use the same language. They also use the logos, the word. Basically, if you were there, philosophy was massive in Greece. You had lots of people who spent all the time thinking. And then they teach other men to think, and then they pass it on and they think as well. And that would affect how everyone else saw the world. And there were two groups at the time, the Epicureans and the Stoics. In the Stoic thought, they had this really strong belief in, we think there is something behind the whole world that unites everything and brings it into existence and gives meaning to it. And they called that the logos, the word. The problem was, no one knew what it was. And they were all kind of saying, well, if we knew what that was, great, because then we'd know why we're here, but we don't. So let's keep thinking, and maybe we'll work it out. Along comes a guy called Paul one day in a place called Athens, which was the hotspot of the philosophy there at the time. And he says this, and he does this amazing talk with them. Where how do you explain Jesus to a group of people who've got no context of the Jewish nation? This is what he does. He says, basically, God's created you guys, and He's created nations, and that's a really good thing. And he's made you guys different from people in Italy, and that's a really good thing. It's kind of his argument. And he's saying you're all important to him. But he's saying at the same time, he's put a desire for, you have a desire for him in your hearts. And then he says this, God did this so that they would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him. That actual word, seek and reach out, is a Greek word which means when you're trying to find something in a dark room and you can't. I'm sure we've all had experience of that, yeah? Especially when I go on a holiday. I'm in my suitcase and it's like, midnight and I'm so tired after the long flight and I'm trying to find whatever it is, my toothbrush, and I'm fumbling around and I can't quite get it. And I'm like, that's not a toothbrush, that's not a toothbrush, that type of thing. He's saying that's what people are like looking for meaning and purpose in a normal thing. They're fumbling around and they might kind of find something that feels a bit right and be like, oh, great, grab onto that. And he's saying that's how it is for you guys in Athens, you Greek people. But and he says this, though he is not far from any one of us. I love that. God is actually closer than you think. And he wants to be known. But then he says this, he quotes one of their own poets, and he says, for in him we live and move and have our being. That's really interesting, isn't it? He says, you know how one of your guys, it would have been like, I don't know, me quoting Taylor Swift or Kanye West or something, which for those who might be a bit older, are popular musicians. But like, sorry if that's patronizing. But yeah, he, okay, yeah. Maybe the Beatles, quoting the Beatles, something like that. But yeah, anyway, for him, we live and move and have our being. He's basically saying, that really famous thing that poet said that you guys really connect with? There's something out there that in him we live and move and have our being. Well, I've come to tell you I know who that thing is. And it's God. And it's the Logos. So isn't that amazing that John's doing this? And this is why, if you look in what happened in the Greek-speaking world, in the next 200, 300 years, it was revolutionized. So many people came to faith. So many philosophers as well became followers of Jesus. And a big emphasis were, we found the word. We found why we're here. I found that thing I need to be connected to. I'd argue most people in today's culture are much more like the Greek-speaking people than they are the Jewish-speaking people. They are fumbling around looking for something. And I'm always surprised at some of the things people get into. I had a friend who would always ridicule my faith in Christianity, saying it didn't have any logic and all that kind of stuff. And he was really into science. And I was like, yeah, fair enough. Respectfully disagree. We can talk about it if you want. But then I found out he was really, really into horoscopes. And I was like, wait, so you're telling me that you think because you were born in July and because Saturn is quite close to Jupiter, there's a kind of divine force in the energy that means you're going to have a good day today? And he'd be like, yeah. And I base my life around that. And I was like, jaw on the floor. Like, what? But I think it shows people are looking for something. They're desperate for something. They're desperate to find why am I here, what's going on. Can I have the next slide, please, Louise? Paul, if you look through the writings of the New Testament as well, they keep bringing this stuff up. They keep saying about Jesus stuff like, for from him and through him and for him are all things. So there's this basic idea, if you have relationship and connection with Jesus, you're connected in the way you're supposed to be, and it will feel right, and it will feel connected. And this isn't just having knowledge about him or occasionally going to church. It's having a living, breathing relationship with him where it's happening every day, and you're living in communion with him. He's saying if you've got that, you'll know why you're here. So that, I think, is a really amazing, powerful truth, isn't it? Yeah. That we can say as Christians, there is an answer to that question, and it's to know Jesus, first and foremost. I don't know if anyone else has experienced that. I know that's how it's been in my life. I feel like I don't really ask that question, because I just feel like, why no? Why I'm here? It's to enjoy him. You might have heard, years ago, loads of English ministers all got together in a room, and it came up with the Westminster Catechism. I can't say it. That's the one. Which was kind of to work out what do we believe and why do we believe it. And they said the chief end of man is to enjoy God forever, to love God and enjoy him forever. I really enjoy it. I really like that, to enjoy God, and to know him and be connected with him. Which is kind of a question for us maybe. Where are we at with that? If that doesn't really kind of relate to where your relationship with Jesus is at now, that'd be a really good thing to pray about at the end. Because I think it's supposed to feel right, and it's supposed to be connecting, and it's supposed to be enjoyable, and it's supposed to be nourishing and growing all the time. And it can be easy as a Christian for that to kind of fall off a little bit. I met up with one of the young people that used to come to New Life for a bit and was part of our youth group. And he was talking to me about all this stuff that was going on in their life. And I was like, and lots of people were giving him lots of wisdom of what to do. That all kind of made sense. But I was like, okay, do you want me to be really honest? I was like, I think you need Jesus. I think you just need to know him again and connect with him again. And if you get that, everything else will fit into place. And they were all like, oh, maybe I've done the wrong course at uni, and maybe, I need to sort, my relationship out, or, maybe that's kind of all wrong, or maybe I need to do this or go here or do that. And I was like, no, I just think you need to know Jesus again, because you've had a bit of that. You've tasted some of that, and now you haven't got it. And it feels like something's missing. But it's a really good thing for us all to think about. Do we feel connected to him? Are we enjoying him? Is relationship with him alive and something we feel like we're growing in? Okay, Louise, can I have the next bit? Here's an amazing thing, though. When it was all talking about the Logos, it didn't stay as just a philosophical in your head thing. John says this amazing thing. He said, the Word became flesh and made his dwelling amongst us. So it took on a human body and became a person. So, and that's extraordinary, isn't it? Saying meaning isn't just a philosophical concept, it's a person you can know. That was amazing. John was one of the disciples. He was one of his closest friends on earth, and he's like, this is mental. He writes this in 1 John at the beginning. I didn't put it up there, but he says, this is crazy. The one who created the universe and formed the stars was my mate, who I used to, hug and all that kind of stuff and sit next to. The one, think about this. If Jesus, who worked at the time as a handyman, If you had a chair made by him, you'd be like, the same person who's formed the mountains and the lakes and the skies has also made my chair. It's crazy, isn't it? Think about it. And yet, here's a living, breathing person. And here's the thing. It's not something you've got to to work out the meaning of life. It isn't something you have to spend 10 years of dedicated study. You don't have to go to some weird mountain in Tibet and meditate for 8 years. You've just got to meet a person. But who starts it off? Who initiates it? Jesus does. He's the one who meets us on our terms. And he was just ordinary. He grew up in a poor village amongst normal people, and he spoke their language. It wasn't all high and lofty. He was just normal Jesus, to the point of when he started doing miraculous stuff, people were like, wait, this is Jesus, isn't it? Don't we know him? We know his sisters, and we know his dad. What's this all about? But meaning showed up to us to connect with us, and it's a person. And I find that so much more amazing, because I think if you're invested in a philosophy, it's impersonal and it doesn't really care about you, does it? And when things go wrong, you kind of a bit like, I don't know where I stand. But knowing that we've got a meaning that's a person is really comforting. And it's someone who loves us and is for us. And it's finding out meaning and we're connected with him. Great. So just to finish off, really helpful thing for us to think about is, at one point, an expert in the law goes up to Jesus, trying to catch him out. And this was one of the big hot topic questions at the time. Everyone wanted to know the answer to this. Which is the greatest commandment in the law? And it says, Jesus replied, there are two things any human being can do. This is the best thing you can do. Number one, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and all your mind. So that means love him with every part of you and intentionally every single day. Seek him out. Not just love him occasionally or tick the box on the census to say you're a Christian. It's love him with all you've got. And then he says this, and that's the first and greatest commandment. The second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. So the second greatest thing you can do, any human being, is to love other people. And I love that he says your neighbor, because we don't get to pick our neighbors, do we, often? So it's basically, who are the people around you wherever you go? I find this really helpful, because for me, it's a reminder every day, what is my meaning, what is my purpose? And number one, say there is one. And number two, it's to love Jesus and know him. And number three, who are the people I'm going to be around today? For me, on my average kind of day, it's like, right, I live in a house with Kim Green's son, Matt. So it's okay, all right, how do I love Matt? How do I show kind of love to him? That kind of thing. So on a basic level, it might be, I'm going to offer to cook tonight. That kind of thing. I'm going to ask him how his day is. It might not seem like much, but there's something really profound and important in that. Then it's like I get in my car and go to work, and I go into a school full of people. So it's like, okay, how can I love the people here and show them love? And in that job, I get loads of amazing opportunities to do it. One thing I found really interesting talking to that science teacher is there was an element, he was really doing that. And so he did feel a sense of I do feel quite fulfilled and satisfied in my life. And I was like, well, that makes sense though, because you're doing the second bit of what Jesus said, but you still feel like something's missing because you're not doing the first bit. And they both have to go hand in hand. I think you often find that people without a faith who do invest in other people and love them and make the effort often seem a lot more content and satisfied. But they still might have this little nagging of, I think there's something missing and I don't know what it is. And we can be like, yeah, because you don't have Jesus, you don't have the Logos. For people who have Jesus and they spend all their time in a, as a hermit in a cave, they're missing something because they're not loving other people. We're meant to make a difference wherever we are. Just going to finish off with next point as well. In Colossians, it says this in a Message translation: all the broken and dislocated pieces of the universe, people and things, animals and atoms, get properly fixed and fit together in vibrant harmonies, all because of his death, his blood that poured down on a cross. I love that. But an important thing to say is they saw your meaning as being a corporate one. They didn't see it as an individual one. We see it like that. Like, this is all about me and just my life. Where they saw it in there, that you find meaning actually in community. You find it with a group of people who've also found it. And he said Jesus has come to reconnect us to one another. And that's one of the reasons why church community is so important, is that we don't find it just on an individual quest doing our own thing. We find it as a body doing it together. And if we make it all about ourselves and our own journey, we ask the wrong question and we put too much weight on ourselves sometimes. We don't have to have it all sorted out and have everything together. if that makes sense. But if you're in a church community where you're connected with other people and you're going in the same direction, that's really powerful. Question then for us is just, and I think it's a great reminder every day when we wake up, how to get involved with my real purpose. How can I love people that are around me? Just 2 examples I'm going to finish on. There's a kid I've worked with for ages, and he's always in trouble. And he got on a basketball team because he's really been practicing and trying. And he told me about it all excited. And I was going to go home because I was tired and I had quite a lot of work to do. But then I was a bit like, none of his parents are going to be there. His dad's not in the picture. And so I was like, maybe a way I can show him love is I'm just going to show up and cheer him on. And he didn't see me most of the first half, but then he did score a good shot. And every time he got it, I was really shouting and clapping for him. And at the end, I was able to go up and just be like really proud of you because you played as a team player, and he often isn't. He's often very individualistic. And I felt afterwards like that had been me following Jesus' command to love other people, if that makes sense. Now that sounds quite big and lofty, doesn't it? And it makes me sound quite good as well, doesn't it? But it could be just as simple as the other day. I just felt simply there was a kid by themselves in the playground, and I just felt to go and say hi. And we had a really awkward, stunted conversation where they were like, "Why are you talking to me?" But I felt like I'm doing the same thing there, even though it might seem small, and there's not much in that. Doing the same thing. It makes such a difference when we do that. A question we can all ask is, how do we do it each day with our families, the people at our workplaces, our actual neighbours who live next to us, the checkout person in Tesco, whoever we're coming across? How can we show them love and know that if we do that, we're making a big difference? Right, let's just pray. Yeah, Father God, thank you so much that we do have meaning and purpose because of you. Thank you that you've answered that question that so many people are crying out for. And we thank you as well, Jesus, that we're made through you and for you. Thank you that having a relationship with you is the most rewarding, amazing thing. And I just pray for all of us right here. I pray for anyone who might feel that they do know you, but their connection with you doesn't really feel like that at the moment. Just pray right now, Father, that would change over the next couple of days and weeks. I pray that they would know the richness of knowing you and enjoying you and connecting with you. And Father, we pray as well I just pray for anyone here who doesn't know you, that, Father, you would reveal yourself as the Logos to them, the one who brings meaning and purpose. And Father, I pray as well that you'd help us be people who every day seek to love you and know you. Help us be people, Father, who love other people as well. Just pray right now, Holy Spirit, you'd be dropping stuff in people's minds and their hearts of what they could do throughout the week just to show love and who you are, Father. And God, I just pray that we would just know that deep connection with you and that purpose of this is why we're here, to know you, God, and to love other people. And I pray as well you'd help us to know what that looks like for us as a church, as a body of people, Lord, and help us to kind of step into that more and more, and help us as we reach out to the people of Eddington and Darwin Green and beyond. And I just pray, Father, over this next week or so, that, Lord, you would show us the people in our lives who are really asking that question at the moment and don't know why they're here. And I ask that you give us opportunities to share that with them and in a way that makes sense to them and connects with them. Amen.